Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be talking about some more Pokemon TCG card designs because in a previous video I talked about what I said were some of the worst design cards in the standard format. Some of them I agreed with, some of them, I got the list from my viewers as well and what I've heard online. But today I'm talking about some cards that I've heard some discussion of. Some of these are considered badly designed. They're kind of weird, honestly, well, we'll just dive into them. And some of them are just maybe problematic. Some are maybe really good for the game. I'm not sure. Some kind of break rules of card design. Let's just hop right in. The first card here is Lily's Clefairy EX. Lily's Clefairy EX is a really unique Pokemon here for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, it's a Pokemon EX. That's not that weird, right? We've seen quite a few of these, except it's not a final evolution, so that's kind of weird. So its HP is quite low at 190 to account for that. That's not the craziest thing. I mean, you could say that's actually a pretty crazy thing. The only other one I can think of, you got Pikachu EX, but that's Pikachu. And then there's also and again, Clefairy's not always fully evolved when you see it, but it generally is. And then you also have Sprigatito EX, I believe, is the other one. And there might be others. I don't remember. Lily's Clefairy EX isn't like super out of place compared to like Sprigatito EX. And if there's another one, actually comment that down below. I don't think there is, but I'm just going off the top of my head. Regardless, it's a weak Pokemon EX, which is fine. And then you also see that it has its attack Full Moon Rondo. This also gets a little weird because this is very similar to the other Rondo attacks, which we saw, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But just 20 more for each bunch Pokemon, both yours and your opponents for Psychic Colorless, and it does this in a format with areas or under depths. You can do extra damage. It's played within the Terra Box deck pretty commonly. And within that deck, you play Area Zero under depths. You also play Trap Ghost EX, so kind of similar to Unified Beatdown, that attack there. Then we also have the fact that you have the ability Fairy Zone. This says the weakness of each of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon is now Fairy. Apply weakness as ×2. So the Full Moon Rondo, that attack is a reference to the other Rondo attacks. I don't know where this is going to show up. Okay, yeah, that shows the right cards. So apparently there's this other attack, which is completely different. But we see the Rondo attack. We got Lightning Rondo on Raikou V. We got Blizzard Rondo on Suicune V. Then we have Entei with Burning Rondo, Entei V. So those are 3 Pokemon Vs. They're obviously in a trio. Not sure why Lily's Clefairy EX is getting tossed in. I mean, it's the same attack, right? So it's clearly very similar. And it's the same name, or it's a similar name. They all have the same ability, except for Lily's Clefairy EX, though. So that's just kind of weird. Then the ability. So if you don't know the types in the Pokemon TCG, there's 10 of them in Standard, but there used to be a forbidden type that I generally don't talk about on this channel because then there are more than 10. But that is Fairy type, and so if you look at Clefairies, you can see, well, Fairy Clefairies. So that's a thing. Then if you look at another Pokemon, I'll look at an awesomely well-designed card, Arceus Indalga and Palkia GX. This is a card. It's a Dragon type, and it's weak to Fairy. Yeah, obviously Dragon types aren't still weak to Fairy, but this is a reference to that. That's kind of cool. Reference to something that they removed from the game because they want 10 types, and then it's here. And then also, if you're not familiar, I imagine a lot of people are, because this was actually mentioned. We talked about Dragapult EX, and it doesn't have any weakness, and no Dragon Pokemon have weakness. So pretty much every other Pokemon in the game has weakness, meaning that you can target it for weakness to allow you to counter it. Dragapult EX has very high HP, has no weakness, so it doesn't really have that. Yes, there's certainly ways to one-shot it without hitting it for weakness, like, for example, Raging Bolt EX, but Lily's Clefairy EX allows you that to be easier. This is a pretty pure counter card in some ways. It has a usable attack. Its attack can be good, and it can be used, in fact, for the counter attack. It creates some interesting situations, but it is a hard counter, and there's questions about whether hard counters are good or bad. Actually, I'm going to post a poll on that before I post this video, but then at that point, I've not actually looked at the poll at the time of recording this, but it's a hard counter, which is a little questionable, but then you do still have, it helps the game some. I think a lot of people think Dragapult EX is a little too good, and now it's still probably a little too good, despite the fact that there are a lot of counters to it. So and that's fine. It's also a trainer's Pokemon. When we're finally getting to this part of the card, it's a Lily's card. It's not actually Clefairy EX, it's Lily's Clefairy EX, and that means it's part of, we have four different trainers in standard and internationally. You have Hop, you have N, you have Iono, yep, and then you have Lily's. Iono is the weakest of them, I think, and then you have an End, and then you have Hops. But Lily's is different because this is like there's way less Lily's cards, and most of them are pretty bad. Lily's Clefairy EX is good though. Lily's Clefairy EX is seen, looking at tournament plays, it's seen a lot. I think I'm not sure if it's the most played card from the set, but it's pretty close. And then you also have the Lily's Comfy line, the Lily's Rabambi line. They're terrible. They're just like not really good at all. Then you have Lily's Pearl, which is played occasionally in the Lily's deck. It's played some, and within the Lily's deck, the Lily's Clefairy EX deck, right? But this isn't a deck that you're seeing all the time. It just fits really weirdly. It has a bunch of strange things about it that kind of just, yeah, if you're a fan of Lily's Pokemon, yes, this card's good, but it's not a Lily's deck, really. I don't know, just some really strange design decisions with this card. Honestly, it has even more than I was like thinking. It's a really strange card. But then the next one we have here is Terapagos EX. This is a Terra Pokemon, and it has a couple of different attacks here. It is also, I think it was the first Terra Pokemon, obviously introduced, it's or not, sorry, the first Stellar Pokemon. It has Terra in its name. It is a Terra Pokemon. This means it has certain interactions. It's meant to work with Area Zero Underdepths and Knockdown, so some very intense energy. We see that all the time, which is cool, I guess. Then it has Crown Opal. This for Grass, Water, Lightning does 180 during your opponent's next turn. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic non-colorless Pokemon. One thing that is a very common thing in the Pokemon TCG that I think is always done, though I'm not right now in standard, though I'm not 100% sure. If someone knows an example that breaks this, then that's actually really interesting to know. But it doesn't wall itself, right? That's kind of the point. You don't want to have two Pokemon in the active that can't attack each other. Of course, that is possible through like different Pokemon walling each other, but you don't want the same Pokemon to wall itself. That's something they don't do, the Pokemon Company. But whatever. And that's that. And then your second attack here is, or your first attack is Unified Beatdown. This is 3 colors. It does 30 for each of your bench Pokemon. And then again, I mentioned the standing Area Zero Underdepths, which is going to be turned on if this Pokemon's in play. Then you can have up to 8 bench Pokemon and be doing 240. But this is 2 colors, and it's stronger than the second attack. Yes, the second attack is walling, but that's not super useful. So you have this attack that's like way better on the first attack, which is pretty uncommon, kind of weird. And then also, it's quite good, right? But then, like an attack like this, we see attacks like this summon, they're quite strong, and big basic, or not necessarily big, but like basic Pokemon with cheap attacks usually want to go second and then attack turn 1. But then Pokemon's like, this is too good, so they slapped on this thing that says you can't use this turn 1 going second, which seems like kind of a bit of a bandage fix to the card, that I don't think we've seen on other cards. We've seen stuff kind of like it, but it wants to make the card something that, they try to balance, and I think it worked, but it feels kind of weird. It feels kind of like, oh, we're adding this thing because we want to tweak it just a little bit, and it does that. But it kind of feels like cheating, honestly, in terms of card design. So that's fine, I guess. It's kind of weird. And definitely something that you don't really see, and it kind of, obviously makes the card a lot worse. You can go turn 1 going second, use Crown Opal, but Crown Opal is just not very good. Terapagos EX is, you can use it. Looking again at Terra Box, the deck does play the energy to attack with it, and it plays Sparkling Crystal as well. But it's, something you're not really looking to use that often, which is really disappointing because, Pokemon with 2 attacks, you want to see them be able to use both attacks. And like often you can't even use the second attack, or if you can, you aren't because it's not super good. Again, it's not a meaningless attack in standard. Terror Box itself is a basic attack, but it's not like the craziest or best attack or anything like that either. So, I think it's a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. Then we have another Terra Pokemon, and it's another Stellar Pokemon. The Stellar Pokemon, if you don't know, it's not, I don't believe, an official type of card. The Terra is like an official type of card, but Stellar is like a thing. We see the border here, and then the attack has 3 different types of energy. Except I believe Pikachu EX is the only one that only has one like it just has a stellar attack, which is kind of weird. This attack is again that's three different types of energy, so it's hard to use. There is synergy with Crispin and Sparkling Crystal, as well as Joltik as well. That makes it usable. I think I've talked about this some. I think the Joltik deck is pretty bad. I don't know if I'd say bad. I'd say it's certainly not good. I'd say it's okay. I think Terror Box is quite good. And in my opinion, a little bit like objectively better than Joltik. They're a little bit different, but it's certainly more my style of deck. But I think it is better, regardless. It's a Pokemon with an ability instead of a regular attack. I mean, in the regular Pokemon TCG. In standard, we see that Pokemon have two attacks or an attack ability. They don't have two abilities. We don't see that. I guess the most recent Pokemon to have more than that, I think, is the V Unions, which aren't regular cards. In the Sun and Moon era, we saw Pokemon with three attacks, though, or like two attacks and ability or something. But anyways, Pikachu doesn't have it. It just has an ability, and then it has this stellar attack. This one's 300. You discard 3 energy from it for this attack cost. That's fine. Nothing super crazy there. It's actually pretty strong. Like it's definitely. Honestly, most of the stellar attacks are bad. Like, I mean, they're not terrible, but for the fact that they're almost impossible to power up, and this one's so hard it's hard to power up, and it's hard to chain, which we'll talk about. Because you discard the energies, then you need some good upside, and you do 300 damage. That's quite a lot of damage, so that's good. It's like a fair attack. It's almost weird that it has a usable stellar attack, but when you have the ability Resolute Heart, which says if this Pokemon has full HP and would be knocked out by damage from an attack, it's not knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10. This allows you to survive a hit. Generally, it's not always the case. There are certainly ways around this. There's Monkey Dories in certain decks where Monkey Dory just completely shuts it down. In other decks, Monkey Dory hurts this but doesn't completely obliterate it on the spot. And there's also special conditions and a few different things. But regardless, there are not a lot of Pokemon are just not gonna be able to one-shot you. So then you want to attack again, but you've lost 3 of your energies, which is probably all of them, and it's really hard to chain this attack. It becomes pretty clunky and kind of just sits there. Pikachu X is a really weird Pokemon for this reason. Again, it doesn't have a regular attack. It's unique. I think it's a cool design, but definitely pretty unique, and kind of strange. Again, it's also it's not a final evolution. Again, that's not crazy because it's Pikachu, but I guess Pikachu likes to do special things. Next card we have here is a card that gets talked about a lot, though. This one has short text here, and it's a very highly played card. I don't know if it's the most played card in the game. It's pretty close, and it's Boss's Orders, right? Boss's Orders is a card that's a supporter, and it's also arguably the best card in the game, but also at the same time, it's not a card that most people would say, like if someone asked you what's the best card in the game, some people might say this, some people might say like some of the Pokemon we talked about before. In the previous video, the what I called the worst design card, something like Dragapult EX, Badoo might get mentioned. I personally would say Pheasantipity EX probably if I was asked that question, but Boss Order is probably better, right? People would generally say a Pokemon because I mean it is the Pokemon TCG, but and this is the only train on this list, but it's really good. This card's just like so good and also so unique at what it does. It's a card that is gusting. It's not as unique as it sometimes has been. It's been in the game for it first was printed in the second set of Sword and Shield, so it's been in the game for a while now. But even before then, we had the supporter Lysander, which is it's essentially the same supporter. Actually, there's a really weird ruling here. The ruling specifically says that you can't play Boss Zors and Lysander in the same deck, which is kind of silly because like you don't need 4 Boss Order. You don't need like more than 4 realistically. And then that would be in the expanded form. We also have Guzma, which is very similar, pretty much the same. And that one was printed between the two, and that one was a supporter card that you can play with. You can play 4 Boss Stars for Guzma. And that's got to be enough, right? So I don't really know exactly why that ruling exists. There's also the same ruling for Professor's Research, Professor Juniper, and Professor Sycamore. So that's really weird. And it's not like cards with the same effect can't be played together because there's the draw 3 supporters, and there's a lot of those. There's probably enough to fill a deck. I'm not actually sure on that one, but there's quite a few of those, and they're all the same. So that's kind of weird. But obviously, this card, it's like essentially has a monopoly on this effect. There's really 2 different kinds of supporters, right? So let's take a look at some decks. So we have, Dragonfall Dusknoir, arguably the best deck in the game. We see, this does not play boss orders. So this one has one type of supporter as like set of supporters. Iono is a disruptive supporter. Iono is a little special as well. Iono is really good. Gardevoir, this one doesn't play boss either. These decks are a little different. A lot of them do play boss. The game's changed a little bit though. This deck has three different types of supporters, I'd say. You can break them into two categories. You have the setup ones, you have the utility ones. But the utility ones are mostly boss orders, right? Like boss orders is the main utility supporter. There's also counter catcher. Counter catcher is the big one of the big changes. That means that boss orders isn't the only card that does what it does, as well as if we take a look at regional, we see boss orders. We see Crispin, Sasaz, Vitality, Iono. They all have some utility effects, but they're mostly here for a big part of it's draw as well. But we see bosses orders. I mean, a big part is draw. Sada's it's more so acceleration, but draw is important. Crispin's just energy acceleration, but then we see counter catcher and we see prime catcher. There is also Pokemon catcher. Pokemon catcher is probably pretty underrated in standard right now, I think, because it's a card that is a coin flip. I mean, I don't like it personally. I wouldn't choose to play it, and I guess most people are in the same boat. But Boss Orders is consistent. It's strong, and it really has and for a long time, it's the consistent card that's always in the game that is doing this thing that's so important. Gusting. It's when people think of supporters, they think of probably maybe Iono or Research or Arvin or something, or maybe Boss Orders. And there's two categories, and Boss is really in its own category of the two categories. Again, there is Crispin, there is like Saw's Vitality, there is Kieran, there is there's like, did I say Terror? I don't remember. Penny. There's different things, right? And they're solid. But the top tier supporter, Boss's Orders is undoubtedly in that top tier realistically card. This card's so strong. Some people have said it's too good because it's like guaranteed. But it's really weird. It's really hard to talk about this card in a fair manner because what are you going to compare it to, right? You can kind of compare it to Counter Catcher and Prime Catcher. But Prime Catcher is also a different card. It's an A-Spec. A-Specs are unique in that way, where they're really strong. I mean, it's stronger than Boss Orders, but you can only play one copy anyways. And then Counter Catcher, and that's a more fair comparison. You can use it only if you're down. It really is good for some decks, but there are decks where Counter Catcher is just not always online. It's not online at the beginning of the game. So Boss Orders is the only true consistent throughout the game Gust card. There are some weird things. There's Stick and there's some abilities and stuff, but it's really good and it's really unique. I don't know if it's weird. It's almost not weird. It wraps around to being weird. I don't know. Boss Orders is just so good and so unique that it's hard to talk about. I might make a top 10 cards in the game video, or maybe top 100. I'm not sure. But Boss is definitely up there, and I don't know where it is because again, it's really hard to compare it to Pheasant Nifty EX or Badoo or Dragapult. I don't know how to compare them. The next one we have here is Squakability EX. Squakability EX is kind of like that same thing with Trap Ghost EX. We've got an ability. We can only use this ability on turn 1, going first or going second, and it lets you discard and then draw 6. You cannot use more than one Squawk and Seize ability during your turn as well. So it's super limited, and that's kind of weird how many limitations they put on this card, obviously to balance it out, and so it's just kind of weird, and it's a highly played card. I think it's a cool card, but it is locked into a role as a turn 1 setup card, pushing for something because you're losing your resources, and you can't really put in another role. It does have an attack here. There's minor synergy with the ability, and it's usable. I mean, I've certainly seen it used. I've certainly used it. Not something you're looking to do, though. You've seen a lot of Pokemon in this mold. I think the one before this, the one in the Sword and Shield era would be Crobat V. The one in the two in the Sun and Moon era would be Today GX and Tapu Lele GX. It's also Jirachi EX, Shaman EX. But, and this is a card in the same mold, except there's one big difference, and those are all on play as well. So this Squawkability EX was actually made to work with stuff like Battle VIP Pass and Nest Ball, as opposed to Quick Ball or Ultra Ball, because I mean it still works with those, but those get the Pokemon into your hand, so then you can use the on-play ability. So Squawkability EX is something that shows how Pokemon's transitioned their design philosophy a little bit to meet the requirement of Nest Ball instead of Quick Ball, except for Hawlucha. Like Hawlucha is also in essentially the same time, and that one does not. That one is on play from hand, so that is kind of weird. But anyway, Squawkability EX is has these limitations, and it's very different as well. The other cards didn't have those limitations. You had some level of limitations where you couldn't use more than one on your turn, but they weren't just limited to one turn. You can literally use this ability once throughout the entire game, guaranteed. You can't do it more than that, literally ever. Last card we have here is Monkey Dory. Monkey Dory is a card here with its ability Adrenabrain and its attack Mind Bend. And the attack is not very meaningful, but the attack is Psychic Energy, and the ability uses Darkness Energy, which is kind of weird. Okidogi in this regard is actually a little bit weird, but still it's fine. I mean, Okidogi's not as good as Monkey Dory, right? That's why I'm not talking about it. This card I think isn't super good. I mean, I think it's good. I'm not gonna sit here and say it's bad. I've heard people say this is the best card in the game though, and I don't think it's that good. I think it's maybe top 30, somewhere around there maybe. Again, I don't know exactly what my list would look like, but it's solid. But it doesn't do that much damage. It's a healing card also. Healing cards, so what does, you move through damage cards from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Um, and so you're healing, right? But then at that point, you're also doing damage, which is cool. It's an ability that does damage. It's an ability that heals, but healing often isn't good because there's a lot of one-shotting in the TCG. And then you're also, this card's put into decks with, and this is more so a card that's used in weird ways. It's put into decks that don't play Darkness Energy. Like almost none of them are Darkness Energy decks that I've seen. Scrolling through decks that are playing it, Gardevoir's not. Gardevoir has great natural synergy with it though. And then you also have Dragapult doesn't play Darkness Energy normally. This deck's like kind of different. That's more built around it. But you have Enzoric EX, which does play Darkness Energy. Goldengo certainly does not. I think it's also terrible in Goldengo. I'm just gonna say that. I've said that before, and I stand by it. And then like Trapghost is kind of like fitting it in there. Hopstack's kind of fitting in. It's a little different. Blissey, kind of similar idea. Overall, it's put into weird things. It's played in weird ways. I think Monkey Dory is weird. I also kind of want to talk about it. It felt like it almost could have been in the last video of badly designed cards, because I've heard a lot of people complain about this card, and I think it's like in those decks that people complain about. It's like with Badoo, and it thrives in a slower metagame. I don't know if this one's actually that weird. I think the weirdest thing is the weird typing stuff, but it's not crazy. But definitely a bit of an interesting Pokemon design. But tell me down below which of these is your favorite and least favorite, and which of these, if you think any of them need reworking, or if you think that they're really cool designs. But they're definitely strange, especially I think the earlier ones were really weird. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all the good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.